In today's video, we're continuing on our NHL offseason plan series, and today we're taking a look at the 22nd ranked NHL team from the regular season, the Arizona Coyotes. What moves do we expect them to make this offseason? I think there could be a lot. We'll discuss all their potential moves coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we were doing a off-season plan video for the Arizona Coyotes, the NHL's 22nd ranked team from the regular season. Now, of course, we're going to do a quick recap here of the regular season. First, take a look at what they have for cap space, contracts that are expiring, and then kind of determine what is the best course of action for this franchise moving forward. In case you're new to this series, we started at the worst ranked, the 31st ranked team in the NHL, the Detroit Red Wings. We're working our way all the way up through the number one, creating an off-season plan preview, basically, to take a look at what to expect from these teams in the offseason. The offseason is already sort of getting underway for some teams, and it's only going to get busier here in the coming weeks. So let's start first by recapping the 1920 season, and then we're going to take a look at their cap space and contracts that are expiring. So the Arizona Coyotes finished with a 33-29-8 record for 74 points. They did go to the play-in series based on the expanded rules of the expanded playoff format we saw this year. The Coyotes did indeed get to be part of that. They did win their play-in series against the Predators, and they technically made the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Now, of course, the teams seems to be going through some very different stuff right now, which we're going to get into. You would think they made some progress and made the playoffs. We'd be having a different discussion today, but unfortunately, there's nothing but rumors about a complete teardown, which we'll jump into here momentarily. The Coyotes also scored 195 goals while giving up only 187. It's a decent differential based on where they're ranked, especially. The 187 goals against was largely due to the fact that they had great goaltending from Darcy Kuemper, and they did have some pretty good, solid defensive team structure. Of course, they did not score nearly enough. A lot of the teams ranked below them even scored more, but it was their defensive play and goaltending that allowed them to have any level of success last year. Their special teams were as follows. The power play finished 18th best in the NHL, 19.2%, which was kind of decent, a little higher than how they were ranked as a team. So overall, not too bad. As the penalty kill, though, was one of their strong suits, one of the strongest in the league, 5th overall at 82.7%. But regardless of those stats, things are going to look quite different for this team next year, there's no doubt. Now let's take a look at what they have for cap space, at least as of today, and what contracts are expiring. So who are the RFAs and UFAs on last year's roster? So as you can see right now, based on CapFriendly.com, they technically only have $1.1 million in cap space, and that's just because they have a lot of contracts on the books right now. That gives them 17 players under contract for next year. But again, as I caution you here, a lot of those players could be on the move, which we'll jump into here gradually as we go. Now, one other thing to keep in mind for their cap space is that it does include the contract of veteran Marian Hossa, who we know will never play in the NHL again. So that basically is dead space, but it's taking up room to get them to the salary floor. That is a contract that's valued at $5.275 million. Normally, they could use that for LTIR, but they likely won't need to this year if they get their cap situation in order like we're hearing here. Now let's take a look at the list of contracts that are about to expire, and some of these players will soon be free agents in the coming weeks. We have the list of UFAs, which is not overly long, same with the RFAs, but of course you get big-time player Taylor Hall, who they spent a lot to get back in December. He likely is going to be testing the free agent market. That's pretty much 100% guarantee at this point. I think the odds of him re-signing are probably pretty slim based on what we're hearing now out of the Coyotes organization, even though what we've been hearing in the coming weeks leading up to this was that they were trying their best to re-sign him and have had several meetings, but what all the rumblings are now, that kind of doesn't make sense anymore, but I guess we'll talk about that further as we go. Of course, we also have forwards Carl Soderbergh and Brad Richardson. I think both of those players likely depart in free agency and find work elsewhere. Now, on the restricted free agent front, they do have a couple of players that are somewhat important that I do expect them to sign, including forwards Christian Fischer and Vinny Hinostroza. They also have Ilya Lubushkin, who's also kind of played a fair bit of games this past year for the Coyotes. I do expect him to get a contract as well. None of those players are going to be overly expensive to sign. Now, getting into the offseason moves and the kind of what we call the burning questions around this team, We're hearing now that the Coyotes basically want to go and cut a lot of salary, at least probably $10 million or more off the books. They're not going to be going to the full salary cap this year like they did last year. They're expected to go with more of an internal budget, internal cap, probably around 71 million is what we're hearing now. It could potentially be less than that, but right now that's kind of the numbers that are floating out there in the rumor mill. So we're hearing that some big time players off this team and pretty much all the veterans could possibly be moved for the right price. So will they sign Taylor Hall? That would have been one of the big burning questions leading into this. But the answer, unfortunately, right now, I'm going to say probably not, because it doesn't sound like owner Alex Marullo is going to be spending much on big-time players. It looks like he wants to cut. I can't imagine Taylor Hall is going to see that as any kind of a positive sign and going to want to be a part of that. So I would be quite surprised and shocked right now if the Coyotes gave Hall a new contract and he accepted. So we'll see, but one of the burning questions going into this was going to be his future. I think we pretty much know the answer to that. Now, another question we have to ask now is which of the veterans are going to go? We had updates from the last day or so from Darren Dreger on the radio indicating that he's been told that basically any player over the age of 25, make an offer and we'll consider it. So there's a lot of guys that are nearing the end of their contracts, some that have some term that could be on their way out. I mean, we've talked a lot on this channel about the future of Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Obviously, Ekman-Larsson's a player that has a lot of term. He's their captain, a pretty solid defenseman, one of their best players. There's a lot of interest around him. Goaltender Darcy Kemper's got one of the more valuable contracts in the league based on how he's played the past couple of years. So those two players are getting a lot of interest. But if you look at all players over 25, there's several defensemen who could probably be impactful and helpful on other teams, even though it might be, either second, third pairing type of roles. But when you look at like Nicholas Chalmerson, even Alex Goligoski, Jason Demers, they could be good pieces that teams are trying to add some depth on their blue line. So they could be on the go. You get Phil Kessel. Now, will Kessel be moved? I mean, he has a partial no trade clause. He did agree to go to Arizona because of his relationship with head coach Rick Tocchet. He may not want to go. I'm not sure if what his really motivations are right now. He's got a couple Stanley Cups to his name. He still has some term on his deal. I don't know what Kessel would want to do. He may want to stay there, work with Rick Tocchet. I don't know. What's Rick Tocchet going to think about all this? Another big question as well. But I mean, really, fortunately, we should be talking more about a brighter future because they made some good steps this year. But instead, we're talking about a teardown. Now, of course, you also get guys like Derek Stepan, who I did expect to possibly be moved this year. You get Antti Ranta, maybe, but I think if they move Kemper, Ranta probably stays. They do need some contracts to get to the floor. I mean, they do have younger players like Dvorak and Keller and Chychrun. They get some pretty longer term contracts. They're probably not going anywhere based on their age and how they kind of play into the team. I mean, this team does have some decent prospects coming. Not a lot of them, but there are some good ones like Barrett Hayton, Victor Soderstrom. Just to name a couple there. Of course, the other big problem with the prospect pool is they have no picks. I mean, this team has been stripped of picks. They have already traded their first rounder for Taylor Hall. Then, of course, they had this controversy testing junior age hockey players. That was illegal. That's what the draft combine's for. They seem like they hired a strength and conditioning coach to specifically do this. I really don't know what they were thinking in that regard. Ultimately, John Chayka left under somewhat mysterious circumstances. I mean, it was reported that he was offered a pretty high-ranking job at the people that own the New Jersey Devils. Maybe he saw an opportunity to get out before he got canned. I don't know. But, I mean, things were pretty good with Chayka and the new ownership there when things were first kind of getting underway. I think Chayka was even somewhat involved with kind of convincing him that he should buy the team. They need an arena there. There's just so many questions, and I think if I'm a Coyotes fan, I'd be pretty frustrated right now because you take one step forward and you take like 10 steps back. I'm not sure what we're going to see for a product on the ice next year from this team, but like I said, they hardly have any picks. They lost several picks now that they were stripped from them by the NHL because of like controversy that they were basically deemed guilty of. So they don't have a first rounder this year. They don't have a first rounder next year. They have several mid-round picks that are gone because of that as well. So this team is in big trouble. They're trying to recoup many of those draft picks by selling off their veteran players to recoup for future assets, which also cuts their salary, which helps the owner's pocketbook, because we've been obviously, like many people and many business people especially, it's been a tough time during the pandemic. His other businesses are, I'm sure, suffering from a revenue perspective. So, even though he came in as a guy with lots of money, he's a guy with lots of money, but not nearly as much as he had before, would be my guess around that. So I don't know what to expect from this franchise, to be completely honest. Next year, I think we could see just about anything and everything. It's going to be a young players team. We'll see what guys get moved out, but there's a ton of interest in Ekman Larsson, a ton of interest in Darcy Kemper. I would think that like some of the other guys, especially the ones on expiring contracts, would have interest, like the defensemen, especially Chalmerson, Demers, Goligoski. I can see them, garnering interest when it comes to like Stepan and Kessel, maybe, but I'm not sure to what extent. So what to expect from them, it's difficult to say. Right now, we do know that Bill Armstrong is going to be their new general manager, the former assistant GM and director of amateur scouting from St. Louis. He does have a pretty good record, and in the past, he's worked his way up through the Blues organization in a variety of roles. Has a good record for finding young players. Their drafting has been pretty good there. So hopefully he can help in that regard. Hopefully they allow him enough of a staff to help as well, because I know they've kind of been a little bit lean in that regard. So we'll see what happens with this organization, but there's more questions than we can have answers to. I mean, I can tell you what I think they should do. I'm just not convinced they're going to do it, and we're going to see a really young, inexperienced team on the ice next year that are going to have a really low payroll, probably like at most $70 million. And theoretically, they should struggle unless the kids that come in and play on ELCs just play their hearts out and completely surprise us, which, based on what we've seen in the world lately, I guess you can never be too surprised anymore. But this team is going to be likely taking some major steps back, and we'll see what happens. But let me know what you think down below. Give me your mock trade predictions on where these players are going to end up, what kind of returns they're going to get. But clearly their motivation here is to recap as many draft picks or young prospect players as possible. They kind of stock the cupboards for the future, which also, like I said, lowers their payroll commitments today and kind of satisfies both needs there, so they can kind of get a fresh start and see how long it's going to take them again to build it back up to have a shot at the playoffs. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.